Welcome to Expert Table Talks, a series of the European Blind Union, brought to you by the EBU Braille Working Group.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this bonus meeting. But I'm still waiting for Matthew Horspool, who will be
hello.
chairing
I'm
today.
here.
Oh, perfect. Will you disclose where exactly you are in this world? Where in the world is Matthew Horspool? Or is that a secret?
It's not a trade secret. Hello everyone. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm currently spending some time in New Zealand, where it's a very bright and early 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's good to be here.
So thank you for joining us that early in the morning. That's pretty cool. And later we will want to hear which countries are being represented. But for now, Matthew, the floor is all yours.
All right. Well, hi everyone. Great to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to chair this. We've put this all together sort of at the last minute, really, but it's really good to be here. And I have a great panel of people. I personally wasn't able to make it out to SightCity this year, which I suppose makes me a good person to chair this, because it means I've got lots of questions that I can ask other people. And
that's why we asked you to chair. That's exactly why we asked you to chair, Matthew.
Got several people. Yeah, and we got several people who were at SightCity who are joining us today. We've got Oleg, of course, who's just introduced himself. We've also got Bart Simons. We've got Jesse Wienholz, and we've got Rainer Delgado. Now, Rainer, I don't think was at SightCity either, but has been speaking to lots of people who were. So why don't we go around the room, actually, to start with, and I'll go around and I'll ask people to just say where they're from, and also, just to kickstart the discussion a little bit, what was your favourite product from SightCity, or what's the product that you thought was most interesting at SightCity? So, Oleg, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Oleg Shevkin, originally from Russia, now living, residing, and working here in Germany. SightCity, the general impression, and we will be talking mostly, and mainly I should say, about Braille products today, but my impression was a variety of Braille products there, including some new announcements and some products and companies returning to the spotlight or attempting to return to the spotlight. I was under the impression that after the launch of the multi-line or graphical Braille displays, nobody's going to be interested in the single-line displays, the old style, you know. That impression was wrong. There's variety. There's lots of stuff there.
Bart Simons, I'm from Belgium. Thank you for having me on the panel. My favorite product at SightCity, I will not mention a Braille display because we will compare them anyway later on. My favorite product was a French product called Handy Exceller. And it's a device that helps you learn Braille in a very playful way, targeting children, but also new Braille readers who are a bit more competitive and who need some more to get some points from time to time to speed them up in the recognition of letters. So it's a not too big device, and the Braille is on little blocks. And you can move them on the device, and it will give you spoken feedback, and it will motivate you, encourage you, or give you points. So it's French, but they make it available in more and more languages. Handy Exceller.
Hi, thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jesse Wienholz from the Netherlands, actually speaking to you now from one of the products that I saw at SightCity, which is the Braille Note Evolve. What better way to join you guys than from a Braille Note Evolve sitting here on my balcony. I won't say too much about favorite products, although I do want to give an honorable mention to the Orbit and HelpTech boots, but I think more on that later. So yeah. Thank you all for having me, and looking forward to it.
All right, thank you. And finally, Rainer. Hello, Rainer.
Hi, I'm Rainer Delgado from Germany, and Frankfurt is not so far from Berlin, but I was not at SightCity, but I listened to the Sight Views podcast of a German guy called Christian Stahlberg, and he recorded a lot of interviews about Braille displays, and I was a bit impressed. I'm a fan of Braille Braille displays, and this company does not exist anymore, but the company following this product's Visio Braille still exists, and they announced that they will continue developing Braille displays. And also the former chief of Baum, Thomas Friehoff, offers a new 20-cell Braille display. And I'm very happy to have this new German options on the market.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I think that's everybody who was on the panel for today. So what I think we'll do is we'll go round products in some sort of order. I've written a short list of the products that people mentioned, and I've got some other products that I want to ask about as well. And then what we'll do after that is we'll pick up anything that I forgot about, and we'll try and get this done around about 40 minutes or so. I think from my point of view as somebody from the UK, and I think this will be another theme to tease out, because I think the European market is possibly slightly different to the UK market, but certainly the two actually most exciting products or most interesting products to come out of SightCity from a UK point of view are actually going head to head. You've got the Braille Note Evolve from Humanware, which is a full Windows-based Braille note taker, and you've got the Braille Sense 7 from Selvis, formerly HIMS, and they've stuck to Android for their latest note taker, but are touting a much improved processor, a greater Android version, AI features, a QWERTY keyboard case, which is a bit of a departure for HIMS and Selvis. So, yes, since you've got a Braille Note Evolve, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the Braille Note Evolve and your impressions of it? And I think you've seen it in a few innovations back. I think you might have seen it at CSUN, which is an American conference. So, do you want to tell us about how you've seen it progress from CSUN up until now?
Yeah, like you said, Matthew, I saw it at CSUN, and back then the software and the firmware was really still a work in progress. And by now, I think we have the first public release of the Braille Note Evolve software is already out or will be out like this week. So things have really come a long way. And I must say, I'm liking the Evolve more and more every day I use it. So I am currently using a demo unit of the Evolve, which has the 32 Braille cells and the Braille keyboard. Personally, I'm even more looking forward to the QWERTY version of the Evolve, because that just fits my personal workflow a bit better. But I really think that Humanware have done a great job of toning the Windows experience down in such a way that it feels Braille note taker like. I don't have as much experience with the HIMS line of products. I'm curious if others know a bit more about that. I've seen it. I think they made some interesting design and hardware choices. Some of them I like, some of them I don't like as much. And like you said, Matthew, it's Android. That's a good thing to have, I think, when it comes to choice for the end customer. Any questions about the Evolve, feel free to shoot them my way. I'm a very happy Evolve user, just sitting on a train, working away, getting to know the device, and putting it through its paces.
Thanks. I played with the Evolve, but in a very limited way. And one thing I was having trouble with is the keyboard, because you do have to get adjusted to the keyboard and to get used to where the special keys are. So, Jesse, could you please tell us more about especially how the Braille keyboard is done and how the computer keyboard is emulated there? And then from your experience, how long did it take you to get accustomed to that, to get it where you're using it automatically?
So to start, the keyboard has the 8 Braille dots, and then below that there's a group of 3 buttons, which is Control, Alt, and Shift. Then in between the Braille keys, you have the arrow keys, and below the Braille keys on the right-hand side, you have a function key, a Windows key, and an insert key. And then at the very top, you have the escape and delete key. So with that mental picture in mind, they have emulated the QWERTY keyboard quite well, and they even went as far as copying some of the well-known Braille shortcuts like space with M for the menu, space with E to exit. They copied that over to Windows. At first, honestly, the first 2 days were nothing but frustration. It was really difficult for me to make the translation in my head from, okay, what do I want to achieve? How do I do this on a Windows PC? What keyboard shortcuts should I press? And how do I translate that to the Evolve? Especially when you get out of the safe Keysoft applications, it becomes a real challenge to navigate your PC. But when you sort of get the hang of it, it is very much doable. Can I use it for everything yet? No. For example, complicated audio editing, working with complicated applications that require object navigation, that is just difficult. But I did get the hang of it, and I would say give it about a week. And now I'm confident to say that I can master the Evolve without relying on speech or QWERTY input to get things done. And then also it's good to know that they have a sort of a QWERTY emulation so that you can also control the PC with the Braille keyboard when no screen reader is enabled. Something that is really important because in testing, your screen reader might crash. It's a very stable system, but it's also a beta system still. So I'm glad that they have that in place. It's a tricky one, but I thought it would be more difficult than it is in practice.
Yeah, I wondered about that as well. I think it's got a nice balance, though, hasn't it, of modifier keys. It's also got an escape key, a delete key, a cursor cross. So I'm thinking back to products like the Braille, which is probably my only other experience of driving Windows from a Braille keyboard. And you literally had to do everything from the Braille keyboard. There were no modifier keys at all. I feel like at least with the Braille Note Evolve, if you have a control key and an alt key and a Windows key and a shift key and those keys at the top left and top right and the cursor cross, I feel like you can at least do basic things like if I'm just reading my emails, I can use the up and the down arrow key to read my emails, and I can use the enter key and the escape key, and I don't really have to touch the Braille keyboard until I get into replying to emails, really.
That's correct. And then you also have the simplified Office applications. So HumanWare have created Office add-ins that simplify the menus in Word, Outlook, and Excel. And what that also does is it sort of simplifies the Outlook email reading experience. So it is even easier to do. It's interesting how future-proof that will be and how that will hold up when Office gets updated and all that stuff. But for now, it gives a really smooth Office experience that almost makes you forget that you're working with Microsoft Office.
And those add-ins, I feel like that's a combination of NVDA add-ins or NVDA add-ons and Office add-ins.
Yes.
But one of the things that came out at CSUN was the idea of JAWS for Braille Note Evolve. So I wonder, Jesse, whether you've had the opportunity to use JAWS on your Braille Note Evolve and whether you can speak to how well that Keysoft experience works once NVDA is unloaded and JAWS is loaded in its place.
Honestly, I haven't installed JAWS yet on this Evolve, simply because NVDA seems to be more feature complete and would be my screen reader of choice anyway. But I have that on my list for this week to put JAWS on there and see how that holds up. I do see that, for example, the Keysoft shortcuts, like space with O to open, space with E to exit, those are not available in JAWS yet. I'm not sure if they will be. So it will be interesting to see how much of the muscle memory still holds up when I switch it over to JAWS.
Yeah, that's great. Oleg, from a Vispero point of view, and feel free to say no, but do you have any comments at this stage on JAWS for Braille Note Evolve?
The only comment I would have is that there is a JAWS license that will be available and is available to Braille Note Evolve users that will allow to experiment with the product and to see the product. And after the 6 months that the license covers, there will be a significant reduction in the pricing for the license. Or you can install an existing JAWS license on your Braille Note Evolve. I'm not sure about the rest of the question. It has to be passed on to my colleagues.
Sure. No, that's very good. Thank you. And I think what we're going to do, as much as everybody wants to know, I think we're probably not going to talk about pricing too much. Maybe some headline prices, but we'll try not to get into the weeds of pricing here because everybody's in different countries, and I think the pricing will be different depending on which country you're in. So, significant reduction sounds tantalizingly promising, but I'll leave it there. Other than to say the license, if you do buy it for a significant reduction, are you able to tell us whether it's I'm guessing that's just a subscription license. You wouldn't be buying a perpetual license, and only
That's
licensed
correct.
for
That's
the Braille
correct.
Note Evolve.
You would have to discuss this with your dealers just because of the country differences that you outlined, that you mentioned.
Yeah. All right. Very good. I can't remember whether I heard Bart possibly had a
I had
question.
2 comments on this type of devices. There
Sure.
was a small, a little bit hidden away stand of a company called Gaudio Braille, not audio, but with a G in first. And on their counter, they were showing a lot of kitchen products like cutting boards and other utensils for use in the kitchen. But they also had a little bit hidden away a product called Gaudio Book. And that also had the form factor of a 40-cell Braille display with the full keyboard and the windows. But I've not seen it in action. It was sitting there. So it had the same form factor as the former Packmate that we had a long time ago. And so I don't know if any German representative knows this company better or has seen this product. And second comment that I always have with this kind of products, what will last longer, my Braille display or the internal device? And if one breaks, if I have to send my Braille display for repair, my note taker / laptop is also gone.
That's an important thing. I have heard about Gaudio Braille, or I know the leaders of this company, and they presented in SightCity also. I think the products they have are from Nippon, so this Seika products, and they will have a new product on Android base with Braille display and keyboard and so on. And they are offering products for the German market. I think I don't think that they work internationally, but the products are in fact from Nippon, I guess. And this is a question for me. I heard also an interview about this Evolve, and it's with Windows 11. And the machine inside is not so weak. But my question is also, what is if the next generation of Windows comes? Will it still work on this? Will it be possible to upgrade it? And is it really good to have such all-in-one product where you have the operating system all in one box? And what happens if time goes by and the software gets older and older, but the Braille cells work well still?
That's a concern that I have as well. Right now, the hardware is pretty sufficient, I would say. It's quite future-proof, but how will that be in 5, maybe 10 years from now when these devices will still be used? We did at SightCity see the Orbit Optima, which we might get to later, which is a similar concept, but they have a collaboration with Framework. And Framework is a company that makes laptops or modular laptops that you can build to your own specifications. And what that means is that you can change the components of your Orbit Optima at a later point. So you could exchange the motherboard, exchange the ports on your device, and that might make it future-proof. I did see a demo of that. It will only be released in March of next year, is what I've been told. But that's a very interesting one to look out for when it comes to future-proofing these kinds of devices.
Although even then, I would have questions because it's based on Framework, and Framework are all about being sustainable, so you'd hope that they wouldn't make changes. But we talk about this modularity of, even normal desktop computers. You buy a case, you buy a motherboard. If you need to upgrade it, you just upgrade the processor, except the processor has a different slot, which means that you need to upgrade the motherboard, and then the motherboard has a different RAM slot on it, which means you need to buy a whole new RAM, and then the connectors have changed, so you might as well buy a new hard drive while you're at it. So even in a modular product like the Optima, is there really any guarantee that by the time you want to upgrade it, Framework wouldn't have just made some changes to their hardware so their new hardware isn't compatible with their old hardware?
Time will tell, but that's a very valid concern that I would also have for the Evolve, as well as the Optima, as well as any other device in this category.
Just honing in on the specifications a little bit, though, I think specs are worth talking about because we talked about the Gaudio Braille product already. There's also products from Braille like the B-Book. There's products like the Inside One and the Inside Supra. So Humanware is not the first company to produce a Windows-based Braille note taker, and said about Gaudio Braille being based on the Nippon Telesoft products, that would be the Seika Studio, I think, is likely to be based on Windows. So what sets the Braille Note Evolve apart from the fact that it's Humanware, which is a well-known company, is probably its specs, because what I found with a lot of these previous products, and indeed these current products, is that yes, they run Windows, but on very poor specifications. If you look at the specifications of, say, the B-Book, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I want to say the B-Book's only got 8 gigabytes of RAM or something like that. It's a crazy low specification for the product that it purports to be. And you can get away with saying things like, and Inside Vision do this with the Inside One and the Inside Supra, it has an Intel i7. What they don't tell you is the generation of i7 that it has, which I think, again, I wouldn't want to quote what that generation is, but I think it's probably 6 years behind the current generation. So yes, it's an i7, but it's not a particularly recent one. I feel like the Braille Note Evolve, I mean, you can never highly, future-proof anything really. Eventually the hardware is going to go wrong, but I feel like it's done a fairly good job of being as future-proof as it possibly can be. Do you want to just tell us what the specifications are, just so people are not worried that they're buying something that's going to go out of date as soon as they've bought it?
So it has an Intel Core Ultra processor, and I would have to look up the exact model number, but it's like the 13th or something generation, which is very recent. It's the processor came out beginning of 2025, if I'm correct. It has 32 gigs of RAM, and it has, I think, 512 gigs of storage. And it also has an NPU, which is a neural processing unit, which is especially useful for AI processing tasks, which of course will become more and more important as AI matures. So I think you're right, Matthew, that it is a well-spec'd computer, and you also notice that in day-to-day life. I mean, part of the reason why I use the Evolve so much is just because of the snappiness. It just works quite well, no lag in navigating through Windows, and that's very important with this kind of device, especially given the price tag that you pay for it.
So we need to pick up the pace a little bit because I've just realized what the time is. I see that Oleg's got his hand up, so I'll take Oleg and then we'll need to start moving this on a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Because actually there are two extremes there. One extreme is the products like Braille Evolve or the Optima and so on. But we also saw some very, very simple and very exciting Braille displays. So one of them is coming from Lucas Components, which used to be Visio Braille, which used to be Baum. And another, and I have one of those here, the Flow 40, which is coming from Orbit Research. And the idea there is, so like I'm holding the Flow right now in my hand, it's a 40-cell Braille display, and it's just a Braille display. There's nothing there, but it's like 340 grams, so very, very light. It's very, very small. There's no Braille keyboard. There are keys, like 3 keys on the left and 3 keys on the right for like navigation. And there are thumb keys, of course. And there is just the USB connection where you connect it, and it's a hid Braille device. And what I ended up doing with this, it's got this nice metal case. So I put it right in front of my computer or my laptop, and it doesn't take much space. So yes, it's a different device. It's another device, but the beauty of it is that there was a choice there at SightCity. You could have a full-fledged system like Braille Note Evolve and others, but you also saw some of those very, very basic but lightweight and comfortable to use Braille displays. That's what's pretty cool.
I also noted, to talk about those devices, I saw the Flow, and the note taker part is the Strata. And what is worth mentioning, is that they use piezoelectric Braille cells. So they keep using the Orbit products with the Orbit Braille cells. But the Flow and the Strata, they have also them available with piezoelectric. And I like those devices also.
So, since you've seen them, Bart, shall we carry on with that conversation then? Oleg, I might come back to you because I'm interested that you've also seen the Lucas Components ones. So one of the things, in fact, it was you, Bart, who said it. If you buy a Braille Note Evolve and your Braille Note Evolve goes away for repair, then you've lost your Braille display and your laptop. The appeal for me would be the ergonomics of something like a Braille Note Evolve. I really struggle to put a Braille display in front of a laptop, because I find that the Braille display is thicker than the laptop, and that makes it really difficult. I'm actually, if I buy a new laptop and it's not a Braille Note Evolve, I'm quite seriously considering buying a thicker laptop so it doesn't cause this problem. But are you able to comment on the Orbit Flow to start with? And if we compare that to other Braille displays on the market, did you notice, because it's not got a battery and because it's not got a Bluetooth module and things like this, were they able to make it much slimmer than other Braille products?
In terms of the height, I'm not.
In terms of
sure.
the height, yes, the height off the desk.
I don't not paid specific attention, but what Oleg said, thumb keys, of course, but that's not really true. More and more displays don't have any thumb keys, and I have difficulty imagining myself getting used to Braille displays without thumb keys. So that was for me a positive point, but I did not pay attention too much to the height of the device. And I see what you mean. They make the laptops thinner.
To comment on the height of the Orbit Flow, I think it's about somewhere in the specs, it's at like 17 or 18 millimeters. And I think that's also sort of the thinnest that you can possibly go, given the KGS cells that they're using to power the Braille. I think the limit then becomes like, how thin can you make the cells? And the KGS cells have like they are the way they are, and that's the thickness. And I think the Orbit Flow has sort of slimmed it down to where they cannot make it any thinner without making it a really weak build quality. And I think they really did a good job on thin but strong.
Yeah, thin and strong and light, and it would do its job. I could see myself with the tiniest of tiny little USB-C cables just using this Orbit Flow with a laptop. I also picked up, Bart, on your comment about thumb key, on your response to Oleg's comment, thumb keys, of course, and it seems like a good opportunity to just step sideways a bit before we come back to Orbit, because Visio Braille, or what is now being called Lucas Components, with their Vario 340 and Vario 440 products, on the surface you would think that the 340 and the 440 were very similar to the Orbit Flow, and you kind of wonder, why would I buy an Orbit Flow when I've got the Visio Braille products? But they don't have thumb keys. Anybody seen those products?
I didn't see them, but there's keys of the Baum Braille displays, which are followed by Lucas and also by Thomas Friop. We have 3 keys at the side of the displays, and the middle of the key is to scroll the display to the left and the right, what others do with thumb keys. I think it's a bit of a disadvantage to have it, but because with your thumb it may be easier to switch your Braille display. But these 3 keys on both sides, you can think them as a Braille cell, and there you have different commands that you can make, for example, in JAWS, and this is quite helpful to remember commands also. And for me, as I'm really used to read with these Braille displays, it's quite normal not to switch the display with the thumbs, but with my ring fingers.
And I think one of the key advantages of the Visio Braille or Lucas Components one is it has Bluetooth. And it will be a personal choice whether that is of any value to you. It has a battery and it has Bluetooth, and that does allow for connecting it to a phone. The Orbit Flow can actually connect to a phone perfectly fine, but it always requires the cable because it doesn't have a battery.
It's kind of interesting. So the Flow has no battery and no Bluetooth, but it's got 2 columns of like 3 Braille keys on the left and on the right, and it's got the thumb keys. Then the Vario Braille displays from Lucas, they have a battery, they have Bluetooth, but they don't have thumb keys. So it's like those little things that are significant to somebody who's going to choose.
But we need to be careful about model numbers, particularly when we talk about the Lucas components, the Visio Braille products, because I was under the impression that they had released a product like the Flow that didn't have a battery and that didn't have Bluetooth. And I think one of them is the 340 and one of them is the 440, possibly. I don't know if anyone's able to comment on that.
Judy Dixon is telling us that she's got a Vario 440 and it doesn't have the battery or thumb keys. So Judy,
that's very, very useful. Thank you. I haven't been catching up with the chat, so thanks for that. We'll come back to the Orbit products. I just wanted to bring it back to Rainer very briefly to talk about Thomas Schrehoff's new 20-cell Braille display. Do we know much about that? I certainly hadn't heard of it, so that's very exciting that he's brought that out.
I'll say I have heard the interview with him from Christian, but Oleg told me that he had this device in his hands, so maybe he can say much more about it than me.
So they developed a keyboard, like a small keyboard for iPhone called MyKey, which did not really catch on. There were other devices in the market doing the same purpose. So there was like a Braille keyboard that could be used for an iPhone. It has additional keys and you could assign more commands that you normally would. And then they added a 20-cell display to this Braille keyboard. So the result is this MyKey with the 20-cell Braille display. It is going to have some note-taker functions, but limited note-taker functions, because you're mostly expected to use this with your iPhone. It was developed for the iPhone.
But it's interesting how companies make a comeback, isn't it? We saw this a couple of years ago at CSUN in the US with Blazy making a comeback, and at the time they were a very, very small operation, and yet that product has done remarkably well, certainly in the US market, just because of the Blazy name attached to it and the pace of updates and the quality of support. So possibly the same could be said for this new product. Does Thomas have a company name, or I think you said MyKey is the product name, but an expected release date or anything like that?
The website is bbtf.de. So it's
bbtf.de.
bbtf.de. And there you can read, I think you can read on in German about the new MyKey and the MyKey Pro, which is with Braille 6.
I wouldn't mind just going back to the other Orbit products that we haven't talked about. And Bart, we haven't heard you for a while, so I'll bring you in at this point to talk about the Orbit Strata and the Strata Pro, or should we say the Orbit Reader? It is the Orbit Strata. The Strata 40, the Strata 40 Pro, and the Strata 20 Pro. I get the impression we've talked about how sleek and elegant the Orbit Flow looks made out of metal. I get the impression the Orbit Stratas, apart from the piezoelectric cells, might look a little bit more similar to the Orbit Reader products that we're accustomed to. But you said that you like them anyway. So do you want to just speak to that a little bit?
I have not asked about the internal because I'm not in the market myself for a note-taker device, so I cannot really comment on the software. But indeed, it feels a bit similar with a Braille keyboard, of course. Otherwise, it would be hard to take notes. But maybe others can say more about the internals.
The Strata 40 runs, I'm not exactly sure what that runs internally. And then the Strata Pro runs Android. And they are based on, design-wise, they are based on the previous Orbit note taker that the name has, the name of that has escaped me, unfortunately. Orbit Reader?
It was the Orbit Reader, and there was the Orbit Speak.
Yeah, so it's the Orbit Reader, the one with the Braille keyboard. But what I find interesting is that software-wise, they've really sticked to one platform with one UX and one experience. So the Orbit Reader, the Orbit Strata Pro, and the Orbit Speak feel very similar in software. So I think that's very interesting. I didn't really push too hard on that because, like Bart, I'm not in the market for that product. But it's good that we have choice there, and also that we have choice in what Braille cells we pick for these kind of products, because they are releasing this with the new piezo cells as well, while they also have the same products with the same software feature set with their own Braille cell technology.
But it's not exactly the same software feature set because the Pro will be running Android. That's not released yet, so it's kind of too early to say. But it's going to have the usual things like Daisy Player, Media Player, Recorder. So they showed a prototype of the 20-cell model. You have a 20-cell Braille display, but it also features two speakers. There's one on the left, one on the right. So you're going to have stereo sound right there. I'd say it's competing with the Braille, what's called BX from Humanware, or the Braille displays from HIMS.
The emotion, perhaps.
The emotions, yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it matures.
Yeah, and I think possibly they'll be, competing at this point in time, but I think possibly because of the Orbit Speak, there might be some more features on those products than actually either the emotion or the Brilliant BI40 and BI20X. So it'd be very interesting to see that. I just want to move us through quickly some other products that came out at SightCity before we start moving it to the audience. And believe me, if the audience don't have questions, I've got lots more, so we could carry on for hours. But I wanted to give an honourable mention to Help Tech, who've come out with a new line of products called My Braille. So Rainer, actually, Help Tech being a German manufacturer, do you have anything to say about these My Braille products?
As I said, I didn't have them in my hands, but I heard about it, and it's a very nice approach. They will offer a variety of 36 different Braille displays. And they explain that you have to make 4 decisions. The first is the length of the display. I think they have 24, 40, 68 or 80 Braille cells. So this is the first question. How long do you want to have your display? Then you have to think about the number of keys. For example, if you want to have a Braille keyboard, or how many other keys you want to have on your display. The third, I don't remember. And the fourth point was which functionality you want to have. So you can have a very simple Braille display only to connect to a screen reader, or you can have a very complex standalone device. And so you make a lot of decisions, and finally you have the display which fits your requirements. This is the concept. I think they are not available still, but very soon. And then you can choose your own display, and it's a bit modular, the system and how they construct it. And
sounds like My Braille is a good name if you have so much choice.
Yeah. It's not their Braille display, but your Braille display. That's the concept.
You're building it, right?
Yeah, they build, but they construct. You build. How you want to say.
One question I asked their representative at SightCity, I said, okay, if I take your Braille display with a note taker functionality, what do I get? Like, do I get music player or all that multimedia stuff? And the answer was, well, unfortunately at this time, no, we're using our own operating system that's already in existence on older HelpTech Braille displays. So this is going to be a point where consumers will need to beware. So you choose like advanced functions, but you do need to ask a question: what are they? What exactly are they? And are you really choosing what you wanted?
One interesting thing I wanted to add to the discussion is you also have the option to choose the concave Braille cells, which means that they are sort of hollow, which makes for a different reading experience. I personally like it. It's a personal preference, but it's really interesting that they keep that unique selling point going strong. HelpTech has had that for years, and they keep to that, and you have the choice to have either flat or hollow cells in your My Braille display. And I think that's for some users, that might be a unique selling point.
This is the third point, which I forgot, that you can choose the flat cells or the concave cells.
You mentioned the keyboard and the number of keys, Rainer. Does this imply that you can get some or all of them with a QWERTY keyboard if you want, or is it just a Braille keyboard at this stage?
I didn't hear of a QWERTY keyboard, and I don't think that there's enough space for a QWERTY keyboard. But Oleg, if you had this device in your hands, maybe you can say something else. But I don't think that you will have a QWERTY keyboard.
I have no certainty and will make no comment there.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So products like the Activator Pro and the Activator would still have a place if it was QWERTY that you wanted. I don't see those products going away.
Yeah, they will continue with it. Yeah.
All right. So it's 5 to the hour. It's actually 3 minutes to the hour. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start preparing people for questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, we need you to raise your hand, and you can do that by pressing Alt-Y on a PC, Option Y on Mac, *9 if you're dialing in on the telephone, or you can use the raise hand button on your smartphone's screen. I see we have a hand up from Andre. I'm going to take that hand first, and then what I'll do is I'll double back to Oleg really quickly to talk about the Focus 640, and then we'll take any other hands that are up. So, Andre, I'm going to ask you to unmute now. There you go. We've got you. Hello.
Hello, everyone. It's not rather a question. It's more like an answer. I tried to type in the chat, but I saw you didn't read the chat too much. Anyway, so I just wanted to precise that to have like put this aside that the Orbit Flow 40 is 300 grams of weight. So I think that's important to know because it's the lightest one on the market, the lightest 40 cell Braille display on the market. And speaking of the Optima and of the guarantees of the framework, I mean, no one can, of course, predict the future. That is true. But for now, the Framework Computer Company, they have very, very strong back compatibility promise. Very strong. For example, they released a new range of laptops right now, and absolutely new with new processors, new whatever, new everything. And still they say that the motherboard is compatible with the older versions. So yes, in the worst case, what you will change, or you will send us back the Optima device without your Braille display, for example. If you want to keep your Braille display, if it does not need any repair, we will change the motherboard, or we will send you the motherboard. I don't know, it's not settled yet. What is user repairable, what not? But most probably, you will send us the case, the computer, and in the worst case, yes, you will probably get a new motherboard. But like in the most of the cases, you will get only the new, for example, new CPU, new memory, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. That's really good information. Really appreciate you sharing that with us. And yes, I did pick up your comments in the chat. I was going to go through all of my questions first and then go through the chat during the audience questions. So thank you for popping those in the chat. Really appreciate that. So we don't have any more hands just at the moment, and we haven't talked yet about the Focus 640, and so I just wanted to give Oleg an opportunity to talk about that. Straight out of the gate, I'm deliberately talking about the Focus 640. I haven't heard anything about a 614 and a 680. So do you want to address that and anything else you want to say about the Focus?
Yes, let's talk about just the 640. So this is a refresh of the Focus display lines that was presented by Optelec. And so I do have one of those on my desk here. It's the Focus that you know for many years, like Focus 5 model, with several improvements. One of them is quality of the Braille dots has improved. The Braille cells are just nicer and cleaner. And at this stage, at least, you don't have the problem of like missing dots or dots that won't go down and so on. One other thing that the company did was to rethink the keys, the display keys, because one point of criticism against the Focus Braille displays was that you've got too many thumb keys. And so some of those thumb keys have been moved, like the shift keys are now 2 round keys on the left and the right of the space bar, which does take some getting used to for old-time Focus fans. So they're no longer thumb keys. Plus, we removed the rockers. Instead, there are like two sets of 4 cross-shaped Braille keys on the left. So one on the left, one on the right of the Braille displays. And currently they're assigned to mimic the use of the older style keys. But yeah, there's a question here from Bart about the refresh sound, whether it's improved or not. I would say the noise level is the same. What I do find is a very nice Braille keyboard, very nice to work with. It's not too soft, so the fingers are sitting there quite nicely. Now, there are no additional functions like media playback or reading multiple formats. All you have here in terms of functions is what was available on the older models, on the Focus 5, plus for supported languages, you can choose a grade 2 or contracted Braille or UEB, whatever, table, so that you can get your text files and read them in contracted forms. And another change is the case has changed. It's a very nice case now. It doesn't take much space. It also sits nicely alongside your computer. But I think we'll have more to say about this and to demonstrate this on the company's podcast, maybe in July. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
All right, so we have a hand up from Nerman. So we're going to come to Nerman. We don't have any other hands up just at the moment, but there's plenty of opportunity if you would like to put a hand up. So please do. So Nerman, I'm going to ask you to unmute now, and then we're going to come to Tina E. Also has a hand up. So Nerman, you're now unmuted. Hello.
Hi. Okay, so my question is, do we know who's going to be the seller or dealer for the Optima Braille? Because I've heard that Reinecker Vision is going to do that, but I don't know, because last year I was looking at the device, I liked it, I wanted to really have one of these all-in-one devices. The Gaudio Braille that someone mentioned is such a device, but it's not as modular, and it's quite a heavy beast, and I don't think the battery was impressive either. So that's one thing, and the other thing is about the new Braille Sense. What do you think about the new Braille cells? I mean, I've only had a 2-minute test or something with the Braille and the refresh rate and also the touch sensitivity and all that. And I was impressed because, I mean, I have the 6 Mini. What I find a bit difficult is to imagine how a 7 with 20 cells would benefit me, because then I can buy the 32 model, because the only difference is that they don't have as many Braille cells, but that's it. And I quite like the QWERTY pop-on keyboard and the extra battery pack. It doesn't really make it too heavy, which, I mean, I found it quite impressive. So what do you have to say about that? So yeah, that's my, let's say, 2 euro cents worth of questions.
Thanks, Nerman. I have invited Andre to unmute to answer the question about Optima, and then perhaps we'll come on to the Braille Sense questions.
I was busy to unmute and to tab frantically towards the interface. So I didn't hear the second part. The first part was about the dealer. I'm not sure everything is settled yet, but we hope what you heard, your rumor, will be correct. I will put it this way. I hope so.
Very good. And I think the second part of the question was about the HIMS product. Did anybody else hear any other questions?
No. I mean, what about like the heavy weight of the Optima, or I misheard?
He mentioned that the Gaudio book was more heavy, not the Optima.
Okay. Yeah, those are heavy. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to mention that Optima nowadays is far lighter. If you saw Optima last year, for example, Matthew, I think you said you didn't manage to go to SightCity. So if you saw the Optima 1 year ago, it's far not the same thing. It's far lighter.
And
than
it's
it used to
thinner
be.
too, by the way.
It's thinner and lighter. It's absolutely marvelous now.
That's really good news. And while I've got you, Andre, can I just ask you a really cheeky question
Yeah.
about the Optima and piezoelectric cells? So I've only ever seen the Optima with orbit cells. Very excited about the Optima with piezoelectric cells. Is there
Yes.
going to be a hardware difference in the case size between, knowing that the orbit cells are thicker cells, between the Optima with KGS cells and the Optima with orbit cells? Is the Optima with KGS cells going to be slimmer?
That might be. I need to go to the hardware department, but it might be, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So that's the moderator's privilege to ask cheeky questions. So while I sort that out, did anybody want to take the second part of Nerman's question, which was largely about the Braille Sense 7? Did anybody get a chance to see the Braille Sense 7? And does anybody want to comment on any of that?
Actually, I was impressed. I won't say much, but and didn't spend much time with this. I'd say like 15, 20 minutes. The Braille display does get some time to get used to, in that the feeling of the dots. I mean, they feel like lower, but I didn't see any problems with refresh rates. They publicize swiping for the Braille displays, so you like swipe up, swipe right, swipe left, but there are also keys to do the same thing, so you don't have to swipe if you don't like it. One thing I heard, that's also a rumor, I'm not sure if it's true, but I heard it from reliable people, was that they showed, so HIMSS or Selvas actually, showed this device at CSUN, and there were some issues, especially with lags when like moving with a Braille display, and they worked on it, and the thing that we saw, the device that we saw here at SightCity, didn't have any of those issues. So it's generally quite impressive. And we may all, well, not all, but most of us, we may have to learn to live with those other Braille technologies where the Braille cells may not feel the way we're used to.
Yeah, we're seeing a few of these sorts of things, aren't we? We're seeing dot cells are coming around. I mean, on the dot pad and the Monarch, obviously, but also we haven't talked about, for example, the Braille Pen 24 from Harpo, which is it's a single line display, but using dot cells. The Braille Sense, which is using a different type of cell. We've got orbit cells. So yes, the choice of Braille cell is becoming an integral part of the choice now in a way that it wasn't before. I just wanted to, and Bart was saying he skipped the Selvas healthcare booth because he didn't realize it sold Braille products, which is very amusing. I'm sure they'd appreciate that feedback. But I just wanted to comment. Yeah, healthcare. But I just wanted to comment on this question of form factor that Nerman had, because it's a really good one. Braille Sense was traditionally known as, there was the Braille Sense, which was 32 cells, and there was the Braille Sense Mini, which was 20 cells, and the Mini was noticeably smaller than the 32, to the point where it really felt like a 20-cell Braille display that just happened to have a note taker inside it. Neither Humanware nor HIMSS are doing this with their note taker line at the moment. Even the Braille Sense 6 20 cell is going to be the same size as the Braille Sense 6 32 cell. So what do people think of this? Because I just think it's a missed opportunity, personally. I'm kind of missing the idea of having a smaller note taker.
I cannot speak too much for the Braille Sense, but for the Evolve, and I think the same would go for the Braille Sense. If you were to make it a lot smaller, so say the size of a BI-20X in width, I'm not sure if that would still be comfortable. I think it would be very cramped to type on and to do all your Windows commands on. So after using the Evolve for a while, because I had this question as well, and after using the Evolve for a while, I don't think I would be happy with a 20-cell version that is a lot smaller than what it is now. So I can see why they make the 20-cell version to cut down on cost. But I sort of understand why they want to make just one casing, one design, one PCB, one button layout after using it. But I'm not sure on HIMSS. I haven't used that enough to comment on that.
Yeah, and Nerman makes the comment in the chat that it also means that the ergonomics of the things like the port layout is the same. All the products that benefit from stereo speakers. You haven't got to fiddle around because there's no space for an SD card slot, so you've got to go underneath the battery, things like that. So that there are probably some good reasons for it. I just feel like there are going to be some people who will hold on to their BrailleSense 6 minis because they don't want to upgrade to a BrailleSense 7 20 cell with a larger form factor. And I suppose this is just one of those things where the market will decide, won't it, based on how well the BrailleSense 7 20 cell actually sells. Svetlana reiterating the point about fitting all the components in the chat. So I'm going to come to Tina because you've had your hand up for a while. So Tina, I need to ask you to unmute. So I've done that now. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to find the relevant option there. And you're unmuted. Hello.
Hi there again. I was on the call yesterday, so thank you for that. So I'm curious about I think it was called the Orbit Flow, and so it's a Type-C cable, I imagine, and then it can plug into, say, like an Android phone that's Type-C or iPhone that's Type-C, or I mean, obviously a Windows or Mac or whatever. So about how big is that, like from front to back, in terms of that Flow 40? How, like, from front to back, how deep is it? And then also, I think, the thickness, I think we talked about, because that does sound like a really cool option, especially for portability and just to just toss a Braille display in your bag and there you go with it, and you can plug it into pretty much anything. That's really cool. I like the idea of it. And then also, was that my key that you guys talked about, the 21, is that only in Germany, or is that available in English also, or in the in the States? Because I'm just curious about because some of these note takers are getting really expensive. I mean, like even I think it was the BrailleSense 7 20 cell was still like $5,000. I'm like, oh my god. And then the BT Braille 20 is like 4,100, and I'm thinking, geez, these are getting beyond, I mean, the usual prices of a 20 cell Braille display being like, $3,000 or less, and so I'm just wondering also too, with the BT Braille, does that at all work with the iPhone? Do you know? But I was just curious about that, as far as I was curious about that MyKey 20, and then also the Blazy BT Speak, the BT Braille 20, whether that works with the iPhone.
All right. Well, thanks for those questions. So we've got three of them. We've got the size of the Orbit Flow, and we do have Andre still here. If we need a definitive answer to this, he has posted in the chat. He says, yes, you are absolutely able to connect the Orbit Flow to your phone, but only via USB. And he says it's very small. We don't have empty space on it. So I'll ask other people to comment on the size front to back of the Orbit Flow. We've got the questions about the My Braille and the My Key, and then I'll come back to the Blazy question afterwards.
Yeah, I could comment on the size. So I have here a 5th generation Focus, the Focus 5 40 cell. And so the depth of the flow is slightly less but only slightly less than the Focus 40 5th gen. But where it's really remarkable is the length of it. So if you can just imagine how much space the 40 Braille cells will take. Plus, on the left and on the right, there are those columns like of 3 Braille keys, like dots, like 1, 2, 3 on the left and 4, 5, 6 on the right. Think of it this way. And that's all. There's no space wasted. So yes, it's one of those things that you toss into your suitcase or like a backpack, and you connect it to a computer. But don't expect much from it other than being a Braille display.
And I'm going to reiterate that question I had about height, actually. If you put the Orbit Flow back to back with the Focus 5th Gen, I'm guessing the Focus 5th Gen stands just a little bit taller than the Orbit Flow?
Yes, it is a little bit taller.
Yeah.
Yes, slightly
so
taller.
Yes, so that's really good news. So for slim laptops, the Orbit Flow is possibly a good choice for that.
It looks like, if you've seen one of those elite books from HP or like Apple, like the laptops, the MacBooks, that's the similar look of the case of it.
Yeah. There were the questions about my key and my Braille.
I think it was this from Thomas Freehoff, the My Key Pro.
The My Key,
The question was, is it available in the US and is it usable there? I don't know. I guess that it's usable so that you can use it with, let's say, English language and all the things connected with this. But I think there's no contribution network so far. So I think you can order it here in Germany, but then you will have to find a way to get it to your US. So it won't be very easy.
I would be very careful, and let me tell you why. So I've had experience with my key, the one without the Braille display, and used it quite extensively. It does now, because of the extra keys it's got, it does allow you to emulate quite a number of iOS commands. So with an iPhone, it's beautiful. Now, here's the technical thing. I'll try to make it very, very simple, just explaining in a very simple way. So when you connect a Braille display to an iPhone, what we normally see is that it emulates, so the keyboard input goes through VoiceOver. So like you have VoiceOver commands, and if you need to type in another, or Braille in another language, you just make that switch and VoiceOver takes care of the translation, right? So your Braille display will be able to write, to help you to write in English, German, whatever, as long as VoiceOver supports that. Now, my key has a different philosophy and a different technical solution. It works with the iPhone directly. It talks to it as if it was a regular keyboard, not through the VoiceOver implementation. Now, what that means in practice is if it's developed for German and if it's developed for English, then you can use it in German and English. But if you need to add any other language, Spanish, Italian, whatever, where the keyboard layout is different, somebody like the developer would have to write that keyboard layout for your My Key. And that's quite a shift in our understanding of this, because we're used to thinking, okay, I can just switch using VoiceOver to another language and it'll work. In My Key, it will not. And also the same goes for contracted input. If there is to be contracted input where there's none, then you have to do it on board the My Key. I'm not sure if My Key Plus has the same. If it does, then it would be a major limiting factor. If it does not, then it changes the ball game.
That's really good to know. Andres made the point in chat that this is not the first product to do this, citing the Pronto as a product that which was a former Bound product that did this with, and you could edit XML files to adjust your keyboard layouts. A more recent example of a product that does this is the Hable one, actually. And Hable have seemed to have dealt with this quite well, possibly because of the good distributor networks. I imagine that the language is set out of the box before it's sent to the relevant distributors, so most people don't have to worry about this sort of thing, and they've documented in how to change the language in the menu. And I think a lot of people would use a Hable 1 and not even realize that it's communicating with an iPhone in a slightly different way because it just works. So I don't think it's an insurmountable problem, but it's certainly a problem to be aware of. Yessi, you saw an interesting, we haven't talked at all about multi-line Braille, and I think that's probably because multi-line Braille is innovating and innovating and innovating, but the product hardware itself is not dissimilar to where it was a year or two ago. But you saw a very interesting product from Beaconsfield Innovation. So I wonder if you want to just talk to us about the Beaconsfield product, because I think the Beaconsfield product was at SightCity, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the Beacon Street, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. They developed a proof of concept, and I think that's something. Before I start explaining what this is and what this does, it's very important to mention that this is a proof of concept. It's not a finished product yet. They're hard at work creating the finished product based on this prototype. But what it is, it's a 2x40 Braille display. So it has 2 lines of 40 cells, cursor routing buttons at the top for the first row, and then cursor routing buttons at the bottom for the second line of Braille. They use their own Braille technology, which in a way is similar to the other Neo Braille technologies. It's cheaper, it's lighter. It also feels a bit different, and the way it refreshes is a bit different. But the possibilities are really unique and interesting because it allows you to have 2 lines of 40 cells in the form factor that's usually used for a single line display. Right now, it's a bit thicker than your average Braille display, but it is a really interesting product to look out for. And I'm really curious to see how this matures and evolves into something better. So feel free. Any questions? It has Bluetooth, USB-C, can connect up to 5 devices at a time, can also show 2 devices at a time, so one on one line, one on the other, or it can show, use it as an 80-cell Braille display, combining the 2 lines and connecting them to one device at a time.
My question would be how it wraps. Is the second line comparable to 41 to 80, or do you really see 2 lines physically under each other? And if you pan right, both are.
So right now it wraps, so it's basically 41 to 80. But I think that's more on the software side of things, and that was clearly still a work in progress. So they were still working on getting the implementation quite right. And I think with the JAWS split Braille, for example, you could do some really interesting stuff with this Braille display.
Easily, with 2 lines, absolutely, yes.
And I was going to comment on that. I think to a certain extent this will depend on what the screen readers are capable of doing. If you look at what JAWS is doing with wrapped mode and cropped mode with DotPad and Monarch, obviously it wouldn't have quite the same appeal on a 2-line display, but you could, for example, still have useful applications where, for example, in an Excel spreadsheet, you could have the column header on the top row and then the row that you're working with on the second row, and JAWS theoretically should be able to support that already because it's already done it for Monarch and DotPad as long as this device supports HID Braille. So
that's quite reasonable to expect, yes.
While you're on the multi-line subject, I know there is the hand up, but you say, we have talked extensively about Monarch, DotPad, Graffiti, but I wanted to give a shout out to the German product from Inventivio, Tactonom Pro, which is not so well known, I think, outside Europe at least. This is the biggest of the multi-lines that I've seen. Also good dot density. I think they speak of 17 lines of Braille, 40 cells. So it's of course, not so portable in that sense. But for me, it's very, very promising. The Braille is very crisp. Depends on the refresh rate, of course. And they're still working on screen reader compatibility, but that's definitely for me one I'm looking also at.
Yes,
the 3 big ones.
Yeah, the things that you come across at SightCity, and I should just say SightCity is just fabulous for coming out with very interesting products like that you wouldn't necessarily see at the big US conferences like CSUN. But yeah, and of course CSUN has the same in return for the US companies. But yeah, this is interesting. So this 17 lines of 40 cells, that the lines must be fairly close together then. Are they close together enough to do tactile graphics, or is it all Braille dot spacing?
No, it's a grid, so can do both. The graphs are quite crisp because the dots are quite close to each other, closer than Graffiti, and I think even closer than Dot and Monarch.
Wow! So they've
dots are equidistant, I guess. But last year they told me that it takes some minutes to refresh the whole screen. So it's just you can load one graphic or one page and explore it, for example, at school in mathematics or so on. But it's not like for reading a book or so. But am I wrong? Did they develop since the last year?
Definitely not minutes, and I hope they would refresh from the top. so that even if the lowest line is still refreshing, you may still be reading your top half. But maybe Jesse knows the product also a bit better.
I unfortunately have not seen that in person. I tried. I went by their booth 2 times, but there was no one manning the booth. So I cannot comment on that, unfortunately.
No worries.
But it's something that comes up with Canute 360 in the UK is the same problem. The refresh is relatively loud. I mean, definitely relatively loud. I mean, it's not as loud as an embosser, for example, but it's much louder than your conventional Braille display and even louder than things like the Orbit. But the other criticism that we have is the length of time that it takes. But Bristol Braille are very keen to say that it's always the top line that refreshes first, or the first reading line that refreshes first. And it is true, actually, that by the time you've read the first line, the second line is refreshed. And by the time you've read the second line, the third line is refreshed, and so on. So if you're reading it, if you are just reading books, potentially the speed of the refresh, as long as it refreshes from left to right, top to bottom, is possibly not as important as all of that. Although, of course, a faster refresh is always nicer.
And you can keep your hands on the device while it's refreshing.
That's good. Yes, that's very good. I'm conscious that there was a part of Tina's question that we never actually got to answering, and I'm sorry about that. It slipped out of my mind. But we talked about products that are at SightCity that are not necessarily at CSUN. I wonder if the same is true in reverse, thinking particularly there were questions about the Blazy products.
They're not here.
They were not there. No,
Yeah.
and I'm not surprised about that. Blazy seems to be very focused on the US market, and they will sell to anybody. If you wanted to buy a Blazy product in the UK, they would ship it to you from the US, and you'd have to pay customs. And I imagine the same is true for Europe, except it may or may not have been localized into those languages. I'm curious, since this is a European program, I'm curious about European perspectives on, I don't want to single them out, but European perspectives on Blazy. Is this a company that we really hear much about in the European market, or is it just one of those that nobody really knows about?
No, I haven't heard anything about them in the European market, and I think that's partially because Europe is less of a note-taker market than the US is. So historically, especially the Netherlands, where I'm from, has always been a Braille display and computer market rather than a note-taker market. And because of that, I don't think we have a lot of interest in something like the BT Speak. And also people really pivot towards mainstream platforms wherever possible. And that's one of the questions that I have for those of you who use the BT Speak or work with it. Isn't it challenging to work with a Linux-based device in a world that's largely Apple, Windows, and Android based?
Well, it's an interesting question across the board, isn't it? Because people would say the same thing about the Braille Sense products, actually. Isn't it challenging working in an Android environment when most of the world is on Windows? And it's a question that comes up even in that sphere, and I suppose will come up for Orbit a little bit as well. If the world is using Windows, why wouldn't you just go for the Humanware product, which is Windows? And does it so that there must be some advantage to using alternative operating systems. I don't know if anyone, recognizing that there aren't many BT Speaks in Europe, I don't know if anyone else on the panel has anything to say, but from my point of view, listening to demos, one of the things that really makes me think about this is if we look at Android or Linux, actually, Android and Linux are very lightweight operating systems compared to Windows, so you can have cheaper components with the same degree of performance. You can have components that don't give off as much heat for the same degree of performance, and you can also have actually in some cases enhanced performance. It may very well be a much snappier environment, quicker to boot up, quicker to load apps, more responsive in general. And I wonder if for some note taker applications that's really what people want, is they don't necessarily want a full Windows operating system. They want some degree of operating system, but they want an operating system that's nice and snappy. So we're starting to get some hands up now, which is really very encouraging. I see Oleg has his hand up from the panel. So Oleg, I'll come to you first, and then I will come to, forgive me, I'm reading it on my Braille display as Karis. I'm not sure if that's how I pronounce that name, but I'll come to you next. So, Oleg.
Yes, actually, at SightCity, there was a Linux-based note taker, and it came from a company from all the way in India called Tinkerbell Labs. And I don't know if you gentlemen.
The Annie product.
Yeah, they were showing Annie, and this is kind of interesting. That's where being blind really pays off, because if you have some eyesight, the first thing you see is Annie, is their Braille learning system, and it's bright and colorful and so on. But on the booth, right next to Annie, there was a 32 cell, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Unix-based or Linux-based Braille note taker that they have. They are using Braille display technology based on those motors, like the ones that were used by Orbit, but apparently a different type. But so it's a somewhat noisier 32 cell Braille display and a fully fledged Linux note taker with add-on apps. Now, I've seen this at a booth. I've never seen anybody use it or never heard anybody talk extensively about it.
Also on their website, they only find Annie. But I was also wondering myself, but I saw other products on that booth, but I can't find anything on their website.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
I kind of feel like being Braille first kind of changes the landscape there as well. I feel like if somebody put me in front of a Linux laptop and said, right, you've got to do stuff on this Linux laptop, I think I would probably just say, hey, why? I'll just get my Windows laptop out, thank you very much, and I'll do it on Windows. I feel like the Braille keyboard is already a bit of a learning curve. And so if I've got to go to the trouble of learning a Braille keyboard anyway, learning a new operating system, well, I'd kind of feel like even if I was using Windows, I'd be learning a new operating system to a certain extent. And so I kind of feel like the Braille keyboard makes me more inclined to take a Linux device seriously. Again, thinking about different use cases, I probably wouldn't use it in a workplace, but things like for a lot of the volunteering that I do, it might be a useful little device to take into trustees meetings and things like that. So yeah, interesting. Svetlana in the chat is saying that it's not on the website because it's not released yet. So that's good to know. So I'm going to come to, and I'm very sorry about pronouncing your name. I'm going to call you Charis, Charis. Do let me know if I've completely mangled that, but you're now unmuted. Hello.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, it's Charis. That's close enough.
Fantastic. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. So I have a question as we were kind of mentioning some of the different multi-line Braille displays out there, and please forgive me if I'm asking things that are weird. I am really only now coming into pretty good proficiency with my Braille, but I am a chemist, and I'm wondering whether with the multi-line Braille displays becoming more of a thing, has anyone heard of any research being done or work being done on trying to find a way to increase like the way to work with resolution with tactile graphics in a way that scientific graphs, things like in chemistry with mass spec or IR graphs, so that they can actually be felt, since that's the same way sighted people look at the graphs, to be able to feel it on a multi-line. So I guess I'm just curious if there's any work being done that anyone's heard of to find a way to work with resolution in order to be able to get the same information tactily as someone would get visually in that way.
Dot, the creators of the DotPad, they had a very interesting piece of software at their booth. It isn't an exact answer to your question, but I think it might be interesting to look into. It's called .stem, and it's used to use AI from Gemini to make graphics more accessible. So what you do, you upload a visual graphic into that software, and it changes it into a tactile graphic that you can then view on a connected DotPad. It simplifies the graphic, it adds Braille labels, and it also creates an explaining text or audio to tell you what you're feeling and what everything is. You can even ask it questions. For example, if you have a graph, you can say, well, this is a pie chart now, change it into a bar chart, or any of that. So it would be fairly easy to adapt that to chemistry, I'd suppose.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, Karis has just muted herself. I'll just invite her to unmute again, just in case. Yes, there you go. In case you had anything to say in response to that.
No, I really appreciate it. I've been playing with the Monarch a little bit, but I've just been curious as I've been getting more into how tactile graphics work, trying to find out, how that can be incorporated, especially when resolution comes into play. So I'd be really interested in, trying to put that together, especially with some of the graphics that we use in chemistry, to see if we can make that work, because that's something I would definitely love to see, that I think would open the door for a lot more blind people going into STEM if we could get access to that same information.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that point about tactile graphics, obviously resolution, the resolution that you can feel is obviously less than the resolution that you can see. So to a certain extent, dotty graphics will give you the resolution enough if the surface is bigger. It's still possible on things like a swell paper machine, like a Zychem or a PF, to get much better resolution on paper than you would on tactile graphics. And even looking at things like the View Plus embossers, the Tiger embossers, embossing on Braille paper with extremely fine dot resolution. Do we ever see a time when we're going to see that sort of dot resolution on a dot graphics thing? I mean, we're talking, very small dots in a very small space. That must be a huge electronic challenge to overcome.
I think it's sort of part of the nature of these dots that we're using right now in DotPad and in Monarch. Do wanted to comment on, I think it was Svetlana, if I read that correctly, who asked about the new Braille embossers. So one interesting thing I saw there was that Index Braille has now released a new type of Braille embosser. The name escaped me, unfortunately.
Monolight. I was going to ask you about.
There we go. But it has different dot heights. So what it does is it allows you to have 4 different heights for the dots, and thus make more detailed tactile drawings, tactile graphics. And it also has a AI tactile graphics generator software thing. I haven't seen that in action personally, but from the sounds of it, you can use AI to create tactile graphics for your Index Braille printer or Braille embosser, which sounds really interesting.
Different dot heights are for sure interesting. You mentioned the View Plus, they do it very nicely. On the multi-line displays, only Graffiti, I think, is able to have different dot heights, and that definitely helps with telling lines from a graph apart.
Yes, because you could have the grid lines at one height, and you could have the trend line at another height, and you could have the axes at another height. So yes, I can see how that would be very useful. Did anybody see the new Index embosser in person? It is on their website now. There was a time when it wasn't. I'm guessing it's going to be cheaper than the Everest. It takes cut sheet paper. I'm wondering if it looks like an Everest but cheaper, or whether there's a completely different sheet feeder mechanism, or any of that really. If anyone's seen it in person and can comment on the form factor, the embossing speed, any of that sort of stuff.
If no one has seen, I would like to mention another device. Talking about graphics, I have a Video Tim, and I think it's really unknown. It's a bit like piezo dot device following the Optacon. So you have a camera, and you have a field of 16 with 16 dots, and you can print out a graphic or whatever you want in ink, and then you can explore it with the camera, and you put your fingers on this field of 16 by 16 dots, and you feel the shapes which are printed. Of course, it only works with black and white and not with colors or so on. But I use it sometimes to explore graphics of things which are bland, like tactile books or architectural things. And even sometimes people send me a PDF of Braille and ask, is the code correct? Then I print it and I explore it with this device. And this might be also an option to explore graphics in a tactile way, which you don't have in another way. Yeah, but I think it's very difficult to get it outside from Germany. You can order it. It's about 13,000 euros. Yeah, but it's helpful in some cases.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. And like you, with my hat on at the Braillists, we quite often get questions from people that say, we've converted this into Braille, here's a picture, do the dots look okay? And you sort of have to go, well, I don't know, because I can't feel them. Yes, I can certainly see the appeal of a device like that for checking that. And there are definitely lots of Octocon fans from people who remember that. So that sounds like a really interesting product. Not such an interesting price tag, but yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Is that a new? I guess it's not a new product. How long has that been on the market for?
I'm not really sure. Maybe 10 years.
Okay.
And I will find out a website where you could order it, and we can add it to the transcript of this meeting. And so who is interested in it could contact the person who is selling this.
Thank you. So we're coming into the last few minutes of the session. Just looking at the hands, we have a hand up from Tina, which I think I'm going to take. We also have a hand up from Oleg. I've said I'll take Tina's hand, so I'll take Tina's hand, and then we'll come to Oleg after that. So, Tina, you're unmuted again. Hello.
Thank you so much. Speaking of the Opticon, that is the resolution I would love to see on some electronic device of some sort. Just because, I had some experience with it in the 90s, and I should probably try to figure out if I can even get one repaired. I have one over here somewhere or other, and but it's been not workable for years. But that resolution was so nice because that's the way that I learned how fonts look in print. I learned that Arial is really cool because it's all nice and straight and everything, and all those serifs are crazy. But then, it taught me about bullets and what the different bullet types look like in print, because I went and word and printed a million different kinds just to see what they were, and because I could back then. That was so neat. And if we could get a resolution of that type in an electronic device that would show, either computer graphics or text in that sort of resolution, I would just be over the moon. That'd be really great. And I did see a very early prototype, I think, of the video Tim back in the early 2000s. And it had like different spots for your fingers, I think either 2 or 3 fingers. And it had those little, dots, and it was kind of almost like a little mouse sort of contraption back then. A big mouse contraption because it was pretty big. But the Opticon, that kind of resolution for doing graphics would be amazing if we could ever get there. Or some other polymer type or whatever that would give, that kind of resolution. That'd be really terrific. But 16 by 16 dots wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, that price tag is ouch.
I think it's the same for a lot of multi-line Braille displays or anything that's doing tactile graphics at the moment. I think the dot pad is probably the cheapest, and then the price skyrockets from there, really, doesn't it?
Oh, it goes up, almost like parabolic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the comment. There are some products, you talked about polymers. There were some products that were coming out of the US, not necessarily on polymers, but kind of trying different things. And I forget exactly. There's new haptics that I think is coming up with the Cadence, and there's another product called the Codex. I'm guessing we didn't see anything from them at SightCity?
No.
No, don't think so.
No, okay, fair enough. Yeah, you always win some and lose some at exhibitions like that, so that's a bit unfortunate. All right, well, we're coming into the last few minutes of the session, and I think people are needing to start to drop off. Oleg, I saw you got your hand up, so I'll come to you, and then what I'm going to do is come to all of the panelists and just ask for any closing thoughts, and then we'll start to wrap it up there. So Oleg, you can go first.
Yeah, there was a product that I've seen for the second SightCity in a row, which I could never understand. So this is a Braille-related product. I forget the name of it, if somebody can remind me. So the idea is like you have, I don't remember, 3 or 4 rubber rings. Quinoa, yes. And you put those rings on your fingers. So if you buy 2 sets of that thing, it's like for both hands. So your left think of it this way. Your left hand is going to be Braille dots 1, 2, 3. So your right hand is going to be dots 3, 4, 4, 5, 6. Each finger is a dot. And the ring, and you connect it to a computer, and apparently it supports hit Braille, and this thing is going to vibrate. So you get the Braille character by character, and like there's a character O, or the letter O, then you know your 2 fingers on the left hand and 1 finger on the right hand are vibrating. And you're supposed to be reading Braille that way. I don't think that product got any traction, but I was wondering if anybody saw the usefulness of stuff like this, because I can't, but at the same time I remember that Telesensory back in the 90s had a product, I think called Braille Mate or something, with a 1-cell Braille display, and people were buying it. So I was wondering if anybody had any thoughts on vibrating Braille.
I certainly don't see the appeal of a product like that. But Jesse, sorry, you were going to come in.
No, I'm surprised that is still going strong. I've tested this about 5 years ago. The developer of it reached out to me and wanted me to test it. I didn't see the usefulness back then, and I don't see it now. Honestly, I'm surprised people are. Certainly, there must be some use case for it, but I haven't seen it. I saw it even did obstacle detection back then with a connected smartphone. I'm not sure if it still does that now, but I'm not sure. Only thing I will add is that it's been a long time going strong for that.
When I was there, he mentioned also that it was beneficial for deafblind, and that you could even, I guess, with the right software, follow a tennis game or something, because the fingers, the rings on your finger would emulate where the ball is on the court. But it was, there was no practice. You could see the rings, but there was no real demo. So I was puzzled.
Indeed, for deafblind people, it could be interesting to have something tactile, which is not Braille. I knew a woman who was not able to feel the Braille dots. And in this case, I thought about the Morse code to learn and to have a tactile access to written text. But I think any kind of representation of Braille in another way than dots to feel with the fingers is nonsense.
We even have a device called the X band that does that. It's a wristband that does Morse code communication.
Oh, really? So I would be interested in this, especially for this deafblind woman. But I really have to go to start another meeting. It was a pleasure with you. Have a nice evening, and talk to you soon again.
Yeah, I need to go as well. Thank you for the invitation. Honestly, I'm surprised we're 2 hours in and we still haven't discussed everything on my list. We haven't even touched upon the mnemonic dots label printer and so many more. But thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you to Rainer, and thank you to Jesse. Particular thanks to Jesse for coming. Jesse's not a normal part of this group, so it's really good to have Jesse's input. And of course, Rainer, fabulous to have you with us as well. And I think this is probably a good opportunity for us to bring this to a close. Thank you also to Bart and to Oleg for being on the panel, and thanks to everybody for their questions. If you'd like to keep up with the activities of the EBU Braille Working Group, this is the Braille Working Group of the European Blind Union, so a focus on Europe, which, as we've probably started to unpick during this session, has its own market and has the European Union, and so lots of European countries coming together to talk about all sorts of aspects of Braille. Braille technology is what we've seen a lot of in these table talks, but also Braille policy and Braille advocacy in Europe, and there'll be some more interesting initiatives coming out of the EBU Braille Working Group in the coming months. So please pay attention to the website, which is livingbraille.eu. If you go to livingbraille.eu, there's a very active blog up on that website, which is posting very regular articles, including invitations to events like this and other initiatives from the European Blind Union Braille Working Group. So keep an eye on that. I'm going to hand it back to Oleg to close out the session now. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chair this. and have a very good evening. Oleg.
And thank you, Matthew. You thanked everybody but yourself. So, Matthew Horspool, thanks a lot. And we'll be back with new table talks and roundtables from Braille Working Group of the European Blind Union after the summer break. Wishing you all the best. Have a great summer and goodbye.